As you recall in the previous training video, we learned how to multiply two fields together to get us our weekly gross, multiplying weekly hours by hourly rate. In any case, in this training video, I want to show you how you can do group calculations. In other words, looking at my departments here, what if I want to go ahead and calculate the total weekly gross for the sales department? How much we're paying out to our sales employees, maintenance. In other words, I want to be able to group them, because if I don't group them, then I have to come over here and add up these three, and then come down here. Let's see, here's another sales record, another sales record. Just go ahead and group them all together and give us one record that says sales, and then gives us the total amount for that department or that group. So what I did, instead of messing with this query because I like it the way it is, I went ahead and I saved a copy of this as my weekly pay. Double click, open it up. It's the exact same fields, okay? And to save a copy of your query, so you have your original, which is the pay rates, then the other one, where I'm going to make some changes in it, my weekly pay, where I'm going to go ahead and group them by department. Then just come up here and click on File, go down to Save Object As, and it wants to create a copy of it. Just give it a new name, and mine was Query Weekly Pay. Click OK. Let me click on the File tab again, and there it is, okay? So let me go ahead and right-click on the pay rates and close out of that, so I just have my weekly pay. And let's go ahead and group these together. To do that, let's go to our design view. Now when it comes to grouping your records together, it's really easy to group your records by field. All you have to do is come up here on the design tab to the show hide group and click on totals. When you click on that button, notice down below it adds an extra row. It's called the total row, and by default it wants to group each field. Group it by last name, group it by first name. Well, if it's grouping by all of them, that's not going to be helpful. I just want to group it by department. So let me ask you this. If I'm grouping it by department, I don't need the first and last names. Do I want the first and last names in there? Well, I may want it so I can have them grouped by department and get the totals for that group, but it's not going to work in this case because it'll group it by last name. I mean, how many last names are going to be the same where it can group those together, like all the Smiths? And then how many have duplicate first names that can group them by the first names? It's not going to work again, at least not with our totals example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over the top of each column, or this column, click, as you saw my black arrow pointing down, and then go ahead and hit the delete key, and then click. And if you hold your left mouse button down, you can drag and select multiple columns, but I just need to get rid of the first and last name columns because I don't want to group them by that. Okay, I've got these other three fields. I don't need the hourly rate. Let me hover over the gray bar up at the top till my pointer turns into a black arrow. Click on it, selects the column, hit the delete key. So now I have it grouped by all three. Well, I only want it grouped by department, and I want it to, let's say, get the average of the weekly hours for that department. So when you click in it, it gives you a drop down, so I can go ahead and do average. You see what's happening? You can either go ahead and group that field, or you can perform some expression or calculation by it. It's got to be one or the other. Typically you're grouping by one field, and then all the other fields that are there you're performing some sort of expression, or in this case we want to average it. So we've got group by department. We want it to average within that group the weekly hours. So for the IT department, it'll give us the average weekly hours for that group. And of course, as you see over here, it's not going to work by grouping by the weekly gross. Remember, I want the total for that group for the week. So I click on the drop down arrow and let's get the sum. Okay, let's go ahead and take it for a test drive, hit the fun run button, and there we go. We got all the departments grouped together and the average of each department. You would have learned this in my Excel training video, but anytime you see pound symbols there, it means that the data is too large. It can't fit within that small window or small cell. So we can hover over the right-hand side until our pointer turns into black arrows pointing in opposite directions, and double-click really fast, and wow, we got a lot of decimal places there. We'll clean that up in just a second. But in any case, we get the average hours for that group of all those who worked in customer service. Looks like they're slacking, aren't they? Customer service doesn't like to, on average, work that much, or we either had one or two employees that took off for vacation that week. And then we got their weekly gross. So the entire customer service department has grossed, or we have to pay out for that department, over $9,000. So when you're doing group calculations, pick the field you want to group it by, and then the other fields you want to get the calculations for that group, either in this case an average or a sum or anything else that you saw listed when we changed these fields, clicking on the drop down arrow from group to one of those expressions. Let's go back to our design view because I don't like the weekly hours having so many decimal places. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on that field and go down to properties. Let me close out. You can also click in that field, come up here on the design tab to the show hide group and click on the property sheet. I mean, there's more than one way to do this. And then the format for that field, let's click in that cell, is going to be fixed. Now it'll give you an example over to the right, so if I scroll over I can see it, but then I gotta scroll back to find out what the name of that example was. Better yet, hover over the left hand side of the property sheet until your pointer turns into arrows pointing in opposite directions, then click and drag, stretch it out, and then click on the drop down arrow. Much better. So I can see that the fix by default is going to have 2 decimal places, okay, after the decimal. So click on it, then I can click and drag it back, and then go ahead and hit the Fun Run button. Well, that's fine, unless I just want 1 decimal place, in which case go back to my design view. And again, make sure that your cursor is flashing in the field that you want to change the properties thereof, because if I'm in another field and whoops, I'm changing the properties for that one. Let's go back to the weekly hours. Fixed decimal, we want to change the decimal places from 2 to 1. Click on the Fun Run and there we go. And then when you're done, be sure to save your work. I'm going to go ahead and close out. And weekly pay, I could actually right click on this and go down to rename and say weekly pay by department, and then hit enter to accept that. In fact, better yet, let me double click and open it up. And then don't forget, as we learned when we were working on tables in an earlier training video, if I want to go ahead and get the total of my average weekly hours and weekly gross, come up here on the Home tab to the Records group, click on Totals. It adds a line down below. You can go ahead and click in that and click on the drop down arrow. We can even get the average for the average. And then also for the weekly gross, get the sum of everything we have to pay out for that week. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.